Hi, I'm Kaylin. Before we married, her family smiled, poured wine, and said the prenup was just a formality. I signed it, thinking love was stronger than paper. 5 years later, that same paper turned into a weapon, one they forged, but I learned how to use. They thought they'd stripped me of everything, until the judge read one single clause that made their empire crumble, and the silence that followed. That was worth more than $15 million. But if you think that was justice, wait until you hear what came next. The night I met Alara's family felt like walking into someone else's story, one where I didn't belong but was expected to play my part perfectly. The dining room shimmered under a chandelier that looked older than my entire apartment building. Crystal glasses, linen napkins folded into swans, and that smell of expensive candles people buy just to show they can. Malcolm Vance sat at the head of the table, his posture carved in confidence. He didn't speak loudly, yet every sound in the room waited for him to finish before it dared to exist again. Alara, sitting beside me, kept glancing my way, smiling like she was trying to convince both of us that everything was fine. I wasn't poor. I worked my way up as an engineer, but that night, surrounded by people who inherited what they never earned, I felt like a visitor. Malcolm talked about legacy, responsibility, and family standards. His wife nodded as if these words were commandments. I sipped my wine, careful not to spill a drop, pretending the conversation didn't sting. When dessert came, some perfect chocolate creation too pretty to eat, Malcolm set his fork down. "Before we wrap up, there's one little formality we should take care of," he said, his tone polite but heavy with authority. A folder appeared on the table, handed by his lawyer as casually as a napkin. Alara's fingers trembled when she opened it, though she tried to hide it behind a soft laugh. "It's just a formality, love. Dad insists. You trust me, don't you?" she said, her hand resting on mine. Every head turned toward me. The air shifted. It wasn't a question. It was a test. I glanced at her, then at her father, then at the paper. My throat tightened, but I forced a smile. "Of course," I said, signing my name with a pen that glided too smoothly, like it had been waiting for me all along. That morning before the dinner, my mother had given me her old sewing box. "You'll need this someday," she'd said, pressing it into my hands. I thought she meant marriage, building a home. Now as I signed that paper, I remembered her eyes. Tired, knowing, warning. 5 years later, that pen might as well have carved my silence in stone. The present feels quieter now. The house, modern, polished, spacious, never echoes with laughter anymore. Alara and I have our routines. She leaves early for meetings, heels clicking across marble floors. I work from home, fixing what's broken, light bulbs, leaks, anything but us. Sometimes Malcolm visits. He always makes himself at home, clinking his glass of scotch as he surveys the place. "You've done well, son. Though let's be honest, this house is really part of the Vance legacy." He says it like a joke, but the smile doesn't reach his eyes. Alara never corrects him. The tension hides beneath manners. Her words now sound like his. Sharp, efficient, empty. "You spend too much time worrying about things that don't matter," she told me once when I asked about a missing deposit from our joint account. "That's why Dad handles most of the finances. He's better at it." I nodded, pretending to agree, pretending not to feel the wall between us growing higher each day. One night, while searching for an old photo, I found an envelope tucked inside her desk. The handwriting was mine, my signature, the prenup. My chest tightened as I unfolded it. The paper crackled like it remembered everything I tried to forget. "All assets acquired during marriage revert to the Vance family trust." I stared at that line for minutes, maybe hours. My name, small and trembling beside her bold, confident signature. I remembered how proud I was back then, thinking I was marrying love, not legacy. The words blurred. Shame burned behind my eyes. I wanted to believe it wasn't real, that she hadn't known what this meant. But deep down, I knew she did. She just didn't care. When she came home late that night, the air smelled like expensive perfume and someone else's cologne. She kissed my cheek distractedly. "You look tired. Maybe take a break from thinking so much," she said, dropping her purse on the counter before walking away. I watched her climb the stairs, the sound of her heels fading into the quiet. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger, Someone who once believed love meant trust. I smiled. Not because anything was funny, but because it was the only thing left to do. That was the night I decided to read every word she'd ever written, including the ones she thought I never would. I didn't sleep much that week. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her signature, bold, perfect, next to mine, small and uncertain. The prenup's words kept replaying in my mind, circling like a fly I couldn't swat away. I tried distracting myself with work, fixing a leaky faucet, even mowing the lawn at night just to exhaust my thoughts. But silence in this house has a way of pressing against you until it finds the cracks. It was a Thursday night. The clock showed a little past midnight, and the whole house looked staged. Spotless countertops, perfectly placed cushions, no trace of life. I walked downstairs barefoot, the hardwood cold beneath my feet. I told myself I just needed the insurance file she kept on her laptop. That was the excuse, but really, I think I wanted to see something, anything that could explain who I'd been living beside all these years. Her laptop sat on the kitchen counter, open but asleep. The screen came to life when I touched it, bathing the room in a pale blue glow. My name wasn't even listed as a user. She'd always said, "It's just easier if we don't mix devices." Back then, I thought that made sense. Now it sounded like a warning I'd ignored. I typed her password, the one I'd guessed months ago when I paid the internet bill for her forgotten card. It still worked. I opened her email looking for insurance, but what caught my eye instead was a folder titled Vance Legal. Inside, dozens of threads, and one with a subject line that stopped my breath cold: Prenup strategy. My hand froze on the trackpad. I clicked. The messages weren't just between her and her father. They included a law firm, Gregson Reed, LLP. The first few lines looked formal, legal, detached. But then came the sentence that ripped the air from my chest. Once Kalen signs, the trust will hold control over all marital acquisitions. He won't realize it until it's too late. My eyes burned. I scrolled through the replies, her father's name, her lawyer's assurances, and Alara's short response that said it all. Understood. He won't question it. He's too proud. Too proud. That's what they thought of me. That's what she said about the man who once held her hand and promised to grow old beside her. I leaned back, staring at the glow of the monitor. The sound of my own heartbeat filled the room. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just sat there, trying to remember when love had turned into calculation. My eyes drifted to the window where my reflection stared back. Same face, same eyes, but there was something missing now. Maybe it was trust. Maybe it was foolishness. Maybe they were the same thing all along. A memory crept in without asking. Our wedding day, under that oak tree in her parents' backyard. The sunlight had slipped through the branches, catching her veil, turning it gold. I remembered her whispering, "You're my forever." Her father stood behind her, nodding like a man who had already sealed the deal. I thought it was blessing. Now, it felt like witness to a transaction. The memory cracked and bled into the cold light of the screen again. Each vow replayed in my head, but the warmth was gone. Every laugh, every "I love you" now carried a fine print I never saw. I hit print. The machine hummed softly in the corner. The sound felt louder than it should have, like a heartbeat in an empty room. Page after page slid out, each one a confession they didn't mean to make. I slipped the papers into a folder labeled Warranty. If anyone asked, I could say I was organizing receipts, but the truth was simpler and colder. "If they played by paper," I whispered, "I'll play by paper too." The air felt different after I said it. Still heavy, but now it had purpose. I double-checked the printer queue, deleted the digital copies, and closed every window. My hands didn't shake this time. They moved with intent. The soft creak of the stairs pulled my attention. Alara appeared, wrapped in her robe, half awake. Her hair fell messily over her shoulders the same way it used to when she'd fall asleep on the couch watching old sitcoms. "Kalen?" Her voice was husky with sleep. "Why's the printer on?" I smiled without hesitation. "Just printing receipts for work," I said. My voice came out calm, almost warm. She yawned, stepped closer, kissed my cheek lightly. "You and your late-night projects," she murmured, then padded back upstairs, leaving the faint scent of her perfume behind. The printer light flickered across my face as I gathered the last page. She had no idea, I thought, sliding the documents into the drawer beneath her mother's framed photo. The first page I printed was the start of her undoing. By the weekend, my quiet house felt smaller, the air thicker. I'd gone through the emails so many times that the words had burned into my brain. Too proud. He won't realize it. They looped in my head like a broken record. Alara was cheerful that morning, humming as she packed for her father's annual garden luncheon at the estate. Her tone had that practiced brightness, smooth enough to cover anything. The Vance mansion sat at the edge of Charlotte, a monument to legacy. Rows of trimmed hedges, marble fountains, and tables draped in white linen stretched across the lawn. The event was a performance, as always, Malcolm at the center, smiling like a man who'd built the sun himself. Every laugh sounded measured, every handshake transactional. Alara glided through the crowd in a soft blue dress, her hand brushing mine only when someone was watching. She played the part perfectly. Devoted wife, graceful daughter, silent heiress. I played mine too, the dependable man who was lucky to have her. But under the polite applause, I started noticing the fractures. Malcolm's old friends whispered about the expansion deal that wasn't public yet. His brother-in-law bragged about shares he didn't own. The Vance family's empire, it seemed, was built more on performance than profit. When the speeches began, champagne glasses chimed like hollow bells. Malcolm raised his glass, announcing another year of success. Family, he said, pausing for effect, is the greatest foundation of wealth. Everyone cheered. I clapped too, though each echo sounded more like a lie. Inside the mansion, the air smelled of polished wood and perfume. On the hallway wall hung a photo I'd seen 100 times, our wedding picture, only this one looked off. I stepped closer. The frame was gold, ornate, typical of Malcolm's taste. But in the corner, faint yet visible, was a watermark, Vance Legacy Foundation. It wasn't our wedding photo anymore, it was branding. I stood there staring at my own smile, realizing it had been edited into a product. Even our vows had been folded into their portfolio. My chest tightened, not with anger, not yet, but with the quiet understanding that even my memories had been repossessed. Beautiful, isn't it? Malcolm's voice came from behind me, smooth as ever. He sipped his drink. That picture hangs in every one of our offices. A symbol of unity. Unity. I forced a nod, murmured something polite, and walked away before my face betrayed me. In the distance, Alara was laughing with her brother Miles. Their laughter sounded like glass about to break. I lingered near the garden fountain, pretending to check messages, but really I was recording, not to expose them yet, just to remember the truth as it was, not as they'd retell it. Contracts done right, Miles joked, clinking his glass against his father's. Not everyone gets that lucky, Malcolm chuckled. Luck has nothing to do with it, son. Preparation does. You seal things tight from the start. Their voices carried over the music, calm and casual, but every word was a confession dressed in civility. I saved the audio file without hesitation. My phone screen reflected their smiles, bright, false, rehearsed. As the afternoon bled into evening, I excused myself. Too much sun, I said. Alara didn't protest. She was too busy basking in her father's approval. The drive home was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your bones. I unlocked the door, set my keys down, and saw it again, the sewing box my mother had given me. I hadn't touched it since the day she died. The lid creaked softly when I opened it. Inside were spools of thread, faded from age, but still strong. You mend what you can, she used to say, and you cut what you must. I ran my thumb along a silver needle, its point gleaming under the kitchen light. The words settled deep inside me. I knew then that some things weren't meant to be fixed. They were meant to be undone. By the time Alara returned, the house was dim, the dinner she promised to bring left forgotten in the car. She smiled faintly, kissed my temple, said she was exhausted. I didn't ask from what. Later, as she slept, I walked into our bedroom's small sitting area. The same photo from the hallway now sat on the shelf beside her jewelry box. I picked it up, studying it under the soft lamplight. My younger self stared back at me, still believing love could protect him. Every picture lies, I whispered, when the wrong person holds the camera. I turned the frame face down, resting it gently on the shelf. The glass caught the faint reflection of my hand as it left the surface. That was the moment I stopped being their picture-perfect son-in-law and started becoming their problem. That thought stayed with me long after I turned the frame down. The next morning felt strangely calm, too calm. The sunlight slipped through the blinds, painting neat golden lines across my desk. The smell of black coffee filled the room, grounding me as I scrolled through routine emails at the office. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. Mr. Harper? The voice was polished, measured. Richard Hale here, legal counsel for the Vance family. Mr. Vance asked me to reach out regarding a few minor updates to your prenuptial agreement. Strictly procedural. My hand paused over the keyboard. The word Vance still had a way of cutting through a room. I made my voice steady. Of course. Send me the time. He replied, this afternoon, if possible. Just a quick review. I agreed, hung up, and stared at the black screen. My reflection looked back, expressionless, unreadable. They were still testing my silence, assuming it meant obedience. By 2 o'clock, I was walking into the same law firm that had drawn up our prenup years ago. The lobby was different now. New staff, colder decor, and a wall of awards celebrating the firm's dedication to legacy protection. Even the phrase felt rehearsed. Richard Hale met me with a handshake that lingered a beat too long. Kalen, always a pleasure. Please sit. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He slid a single document across the table. The header read, Asset Alignment Protocol. I skimmed the lines, polite language, subtle phrasing, but beneath it, the meaning was sharp and unmistakable. If I signed this, every joint share I'd ever owned through the marriage, my firm, my investments, would temporarily transfer under Vance family management for strategic consolidation. I looked up slowly. Just to be clear, I said evenly, you're asking me to hand over control of my own company's shares. Richard's smile twitched. Not hand over Kalen. Align. It's simply for asset protection during restructuring. Completely reversible. I nodded as if considering it. And Alara already knows about this? He hesitated, tapping his pen. She's aware. She trusts your cooperation, as always. That phrase, as always, landed like a slap disguised as a compliment. I let the silence stretch until he shifted in his seat. I'll need a digital copy, I said. My accountant will review it before I sign anything. That wiped the smirk off his face. Of course, he said slowly, though I assumed Alara had already briefed you. I smiled. No, but she will. The tension between us thickened, invisible but unmistakable. For the first time, he looked uncertain, like a man realizing the script had changed mid-scene. He gathered his papers too quickly, fumbling slightly before standing. We'll wait for your confirmation then. Do that, I said, rising to leave. The drive back was quiet. The afternoon sun glared off the windshield and the hum of the tires was the only sound. I thought about all the times I'd stayed quiet at their dinners, nodding when Malcolm made snide jokes about self-made men, smiling when Alara's brother bragged about his business instincts. I used to think silence kept the peace. I see now, it only fed their illusion of control. They wanted a son-in-law who would nod, smile, and sign. But I'd signed my last thing for them. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the decision was already made. The house looked the same from the outside, neat, manicured, perfect. Inside, though, something had shifted. I set my briefcase on the counter, took out my phone, and hit play. The recording from the meeting filled the kitchen with Hale's voice. Alara trusts your cooperation, as always. Hearing it out loud made it sound even more pathetic. How confident they were in their manipulation. I opened the drawer beneath her mother's photo and slid the phone inside. The file folder marked warranty was still there, neat and waiting. I added a new flash drive beside it. Paper for paper, I whispered, word for word. They thought they'd called me to tighten their hold. They didn't know that call had just turned into the first crack in their system. I thought that call was theirs. I didn't know. It had just become mine. 2 days later, the message arrived while I was pouring coffee. Alara's voice came from upstairs, light and melodic. Honey, don't forget, Dad's hosting a small family celebration tonight. You're coming, right? Her tone was sweet, practiced. When she stepped into the kitchen, she looked radiant, hair curled perfectly, a new emerald necklace glinting under the morning light. I'd never seen it before. Dad closed a massive deal, she said, slipping on her heels. It's a big night for the family. Come celebrate with us. Her warmth felt rehearsed. like a commercial that had been shot too many times. I nodded slowly. Of course, I said, though every word tasted heavy. The Vance mansion gleamed brighter than ever that evening. Strings of lights draped over the hedges, a live band playing something jazzy by the pool. Laughter echoed through the air, too loud, too polished. The family moved in perfect formation, glasses raised, smiles locked in place. Malcolm stood near the grand staircase, champagne in hand. To family, he began, his voice carrying across the crowd. To loyalty, to building something that lasts. Applause erupted. Alara beamed beside him, glowing under the chandelier. Her brother clapped like a man congratulating himself. Then through the noise I spotted Richard Hale, the family lawyer, standing near the bar. He caught Alara's eye and gave a subtle nod. She smiled back, almost imperceptibly. Something twisted in my chest. I'd seen that kind of silent exchange before. In boardrooms, when two people shared a secret no one else was supposed to know. I sipped my drink, my gaze fixed on Malcolm as he toasted again. This deal, he said proudly, is a testament to our collective effort, our innovation. Innovation. The word hit harder than it should have. I'd heard him use it before, once when I presented my data model to his company, the same one he'd dismissed as too experimental, the same one that had quietly disappeared from my files months later. I felt my jaw tighten. They hadn't built something new. They'd built it on me. I smiled for the cameras, shook hands, played the part. Inside, a slow fire was building. Every polite nod from a guest, every congratulations that brushed past me, pressed down like weight on a bruise. When the speeches ended, I found Alara near the balcony, her laughter soft and false. I stepped beside her. That deal your father mentioned, I said evenly, does it include the data model I built last year? Her smile faltered, but only slightly. You said you didn't need credit, she replied smoothly. You're part of the family, right? Those words sliced deeper than she knew. Part of the family. I let out a quiet breath, nodded once. Right. I'm part of the family, until I'm not. For a moment she just looked at me, puzzled, then turned back toward the crowd, her attention already drifting. That told me everything I needed to know. I stepped away, moving through the clusters of laughing guests until I reached the glass doors leading to the terrace. The night air was cool, sharp. Music pulsed behind me, muffled by the closed doors. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, calm and distant, like it belonged to another world entirely. I leaned against the railing, the hum of conversation fading. My reflection stared back from the dark window, someone I barely recognized. A man who had traded truth for peace, love for appearances. My mother's words echoed softly in my head. If they steal your peace, son, don't ask for it back. Take it back. I pulled out my phone, one quick message to my accountant. Activate file V13. Quietly. That file wasn't a threat. It was a key. Years ago, when I helped Malcolm structure his investment portfolios, I'd built in safeguards, legal ones, small clauses buried in contracts that ensured my partial ownership would revert if certain trust misalignments occurred. They'd laughed at my paranoia back then. I wasn't laughing now. I slipped the phone into my pocket, my pulse steady. I'd given enough of myself to their image. Now it was time to take something back. When I returned inside, the music had softened. Couples danced under the soft glow of chandeliers. Alara was in the center, her hand in her father's, smiling as if she'd earned every ounce of it. I walked past them quietly, through the hall lined with framed photographs, and there it was again, our wedding photo, the one I'd seen before. Only this time, something was different. A thin fracture cut diagonally across the glass, right through my face. I stopped, staring at it. The crack caught the light from the nearby lamp, reflecting a faint shimmer. And for a moment it almost looked beautiful. The crack isn't damage, I whispered. It's light finding its way in. I reached out, touched the glass gently. Behind me, the party roared on. Music, laughter, champagne. But all I heard was the quiet hum of something new forming inside me. And by morning, that light was going to burn. I woke to silence. Not the kind that comforts you, the kind that tells you something's gone. The faint smell of last night's champagne lingered in the air. Two half-empty glasses sat on the counter beside the vase of wilted lilies Alara had arranged earlier in the week. The house looked frozen mid-scene, like everyone had stepped out during intermission and never returned. "Alara?" My voice sounded strange in the stillness. No answer. Sunlight poured through the kitchen blinds, painting lines across the marble counter. And there it was, a manila envelope, centered neatly beside the coffee pot. No note, no lipstick stain, no trace of hesitation, just the label in her handwriting. Notice of separation. For a few seconds I stood there, unmoving. My fingers found the edge of the envelope, tracing it like a wound I wasn't ready to open. Then I tore it carefully and began to read. It was official. Drafted by Gregson Reed LLP, signed by Alara Vance Harper. Her signature slanted forward, confident, unapologetic. The first paragraph was standard legal language, distribution of assets, property accounts, but the second line on page 3, that's where it changed everything. All winnings, assets, and property acquired by either party during the marriage shall remain under the Vance family trust. Beneath it, a yellow post-it. Please make this easy for both of us. My hand trembled once, then steadied. I set the papers down and just stared. The sound of the refrigerator's hum was suddenly deafening. They'd timed it perfectly, say. The party, the smiles, the deal. While I'd been standing there clapping for them, they were already dissolving my life behind the scenes. The prenup, the clause, the trust, all of it. A slow-moving trap, and I'd walked right into it. I sat down at the kitchen table. The seat across from me was empty, her coffee cup still half full. I stared at it for so long the coffee film began to shimmer in the sunlight. Hours slipped by. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stared at the cracked wedding photo on the wall, the fracture running straight through my face. The air in the house felt heavier with every minute. My eyes drifted to the piano in the corner. She'd once played there for me after my mother's funeral, her fingers trembling through the melody of Claire de Lune. That night, I'd thought love could outlast grief. I'd thought she meant it when she whispered, "Forever." Forever, it turned out, lasted exactly until the money got bigger than the marriage. At some point, the light shifted, afternoon bleeding into early evening. I hadn't moved. My mind kept circling the same truth. Everything I'd built, everything I'd trusted, had been signed away with one pen stroke. Then as I gathered the papers to put them back in the envelope, something caught my eye. A line halfway down page 4, small, legalistic, almost invisible. Any financial gain during the marriage, including but not limited to windfalls, prizes, or winnings, shall be deemed joint marital property. I froze. I read it again, slower this time. Then again until the words etched themselves into my mind. Joint marital property. That clause hadn't been written to protect me, but it didn't matter. It existed, which meant every cent they'd earned using my data model, the same one that powered the massive deal Malcolm toasted to last night, fell under that category. And legally, I was entitled to half. The room suddenly felt different, clearer. I wasn't just reading a betrayal anymore. I was holding their mistake. I leaned back, breathing slowly, the numbness dissolving into something sharper. The grief was still there, but it no longer controlled me. It was fuel now. Cold, steady fuel. I gathered the documents, stacked them neatly, and placed them beside my phone. The edge of the manila envelope gleamed in the morning light, like a quiet challenge. Then I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Evelyn Shaw, Family Law Division," came the voice on the other end. Calm, measured, confident. "Ms. Shaw," I said, keeping my tone even. "This is Kaylin Harper. I need you to review a prenup. They said it protects them. I think it just saved me." There was a pause, the kind of silence only a seasoned lawyer gives when she already knows the storm about to break. "I'll clear my morning," she replied. I set the phone down, exhaled, and looked once more at the cracked photo across the room. By the time she came home, I'd already turned her weapon into mine. It was close to 8 when I heard the sound of her heels against the hardwood floor. Sharp, confident, the rhythm of someone who thought she still owned the room. I stayed seated at the kitchen counter, the prenup folder beside me, calm as still water. She froze when she saw me. "You're still up?" I smiled faintly. "You left your papers here." Her eyes darted to the counter. "I thought it'd be better this way," she said, voice low but steady. "Clean. Quiet." "Clean," I repeated softly, sliding the folder toward her. You might want to keep a copy. You never know when someone might need to read it twice. She hesitated before picking it up. I could see the confusion behind her polished mask. She had expected anger, shouting, tears. Not this. She tried to fill the silence. It's just business, Kaylin. You knew how my family works. I leaned back, studying her face. I did. I just didn't realize I learned faster than they thought. That made her blink. What's that supposed to mean? I opened the folder and tapped one page with my finger. Do you know what happens when someone wins a lottery during marriage? She frowned. What? It's called joint marital property, I said evenly, meaning half of it belongs to the spouse. For the first time, color drained from her face. That's not... Oh, it's written right here, I said, pointing to the exact line she'd skimmed over. Clause 4.2, subsection B. Any financial gain, including prizes or winnings, is joint marital property. Your family's lawyers drafted it, remember? Her lips parted, but no words came out. I continued, voice steady. So when you hit that $30 million jackpot 3 months ago, technically, half of it was mine. The silence that followed was almost beautiful. She sank into the chair across from me, trying to recover her composure. You wouldn't do that. I'm not doing anything, I said quietly. I'm just reading. That night, I slept like I hadn't in weeks. The next morning, I sat across from Evelyn Shaw in her office. Mahogany desk, framed degrees, and the calm poise of a woman who'd dismantled empires before breakfast. She reviewed the documents in silence, glasses sliding down her nose as she read each clause. When she finally looked up, her expression was unreadable. You've got something rare, she said. Poetic justice written in ink. I nodded slowly. So, do I fight it? She smiled, small, deliberate. No, you win quietly. Her words sat in the air like a verdict. Then she flipped to another section of the file. Did you know Malcolm's company has several private accounts linked to your wife's name? I frowned. No. She turned the screen toward me. Bank transfers, trust deposits, unexplained withdrawals. If we trace this, we'll find the money trail leading from your intellectual property right into the Vance Trust. You didn't just marry into manipulation, Kaylin. They used your work to fund their fortune. Something inside me stilled. It wasn't rage anymore. It was focus. By the time I left Evelyn's office, the air felt lighter. I had a plan now, one built not on emotion, but precision. Every document, every word, every clause was a stepping stone. That evening when I returned home, Alara was pacing near the window. Her phone was in her hand, but she wasn't texting. She was waiting, watching me. I placed my keys on the counter and met her eyes. You always said everything we had was yours, I said quietly. You were right. Half of it is. Her lips trembled. She tried to speak, but I walked past her toward the study, calm, deliberate. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of her breath catching. Later that night, I sat at my desk, the soft glow of the monitor casting light over the final document. One email, one subject line, amendment review, section 4.2, joint property. No explanation, just the highlighted clause attached. I hovered over the send button for a moment, then clicked it. The message shot off into the dark, straight to Richard Hale, the family's lawyer. I poured a drink, watching the reflection of the city lights shimmer against the glass. They wrote the rules, I murmured to myself. I just learned to read them better. By sunrise, the first cracks had already begun to show. I didn't see them, but I could feel them. The kind of stillness that comes before something big breaks, not in sound, but in structure. While I stirred sugar into my coffee, somewhere across town, Malcolm Vance's empire was starting to splinter. By 8 a.m., phones were ringing off the hook in his corner office. Staff rushed in and out, faces pale, holding folders like shields. The family lawyer, Richard Hale, stood at the window, unmoving, until Malcolm stormed in. Why is our trust account frozen? Malcolm's voice boomed through the room. Hale hesitated, sweat already forming at his temple. Clause 4.2 was activated. The court issued an automatic hold pending review. Malcolm slammed his fist on the desk. That clause was written to protect us. It protects both parties, Hale replied quietly. You didn't read the final version. For a man who spent his life controlling others, Malcolm finally understood what losing control felt like. Every shared investment, every holding, every shell company tied to the Vance family trust, all locked. frozen by a single signature. Mine. While they shouted, I sat in a quiet cafe downtown, black coffee steaming beside my phone. The air smelled like rain and roasted beans. People talked softly around me, ordinary lives unfolding in peace. I hadn't felt part of that world for a long time. Evelyn Shaw's message appeared on my screen. Everything's moving. You did it. I typed back, it's not about money anymore. Across the room, a man in a gray suit recognized me. Hey, he said with a polite smile. You're Kaylin Harper, right? From the Vance Foundation events? Used to be, I answered. Rough week? He asked. I smiled faintly. Best one in years. He laughed awkwardly and went back to his paper, leaving me alone again with my thoughts. 2 hours later, I stood in the courtroom, oak-paneled walls, fluorescent lights humming faintly. Alara sat across the aisle beside her father and Hale, perfectly dressed but visibly tense. Her hands clenched around her purse, knuckles white. Evelyn sat next to me, calm as ever. Just breathe, she whispered. The judge entered and the room quieted. Legal language filled the air. Citations, clauses, cross-references. Words that once felt like weapons aimed at me now sounded like armor. When the judge read aloud the clause confirming my right to half of all winnings during the marriage, I heard the first audible gasp. Then Evelyn stood, her voice smooth, deliberate. Your Honor, she said, we submit documentation showing multiple financial transfers from the Vance Family Trust into offshore accounts, funds originating from Mr. Harper's proprietary data model as well as Mrs. Vance Harper's lottery winnings. Malcolm leaned forward sharply. Those accounts were investments. Evelyn didn't flinch. Investments require disclosure. These were concealed. She handed the clerk a folder. And here, she continued, is evidence of separate transactions between Mrs. Vance Harper and an individual residing in Geneva, using those same funds. A ripple spread through the courtroom. Alara's face drained of color. The judge leaned back, eyes narrowing. Is this accurate, Mrs. Vance Harper? Alara didn't answer. Evelyn's final words landed like a gavel before the gavel itself. Your Honor, this case isn't about love. It's about fraud. The ruling came quickly. The prenup stood, but so did the clause. Half of everything gained during the marriage, including trust earnings, now legally belonged to me. Malcolm's jaw tightened. Hale rubbed his forehead. Alara stared at the table, not at me. When it was over, the judge's voice was calm. This court recognizes Mr. Harper's rights under Section 4.2, judgment in his favor. Outside, the air felt lighter. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but I kept walking. Then I heard her voice. Kaylin! I turned. Alara stood by the courthouse steps, mascara streaked, shoulders shaking. You could have ruined me completely, she said, her voice cracking. Why didn't you? I studied her face, the woman I had once trusted more than anyone. Because I wanted to remember, I said softly, that I used to love you. That's enough punishment. She sobbed, not from guilt, but because she realized I no longer belonged to her world. By afternoon, headlines were everywhere. Vance Empire under investigation. Assets frozen pending audit. I drove home in silence, parked in the driveway, and walked through the front door for the last time. The house looked the same, spotless, expensive, lifeless. I packed one small bag, a few shirts, my laptop, my mother's sewing box. Before I left, I placed the mansion keys on the marble counter beside the same cracked wedding photo. The morning light struck the glass, refracting into a line of brightness that ran across the table. The same light that had once shone through a fracture. They built walls of contracts and gold, I thought, locking the door behind me. I built peace out of paper and silence. As I stepped outside, the wind carried the faint hum of city traffic, life moving on without notice. But freedom isn't silence. It's choosing when to speak again. Weeks passed after the trial, and the world finally stopped spinning. Autumn crept into Charlotte, laying gold over the trees that lined the lakeshore. The mornings were cool now, the kind that asked for sweaters and quiet. I had traded glass walls and marble floors for a small cedar cabin by the lake. Nothing fancy, but it breathed. I woke early, as I always did. The light that filtered through the curtains was soft, still half asleep. I brewed a pot of coffee, listening to the kettle whistle. That sound, just water meeting heat, had become my new rhythm. On the windowsill sat a single cardboard box. Inside were the last remnants of the case, printed rulings, settlement papers, the judge's stamped decision. I hadn't opened it since moving in. I didn't need to. Those papers had already done their job. They'd ended something that never should have begun. The lake outside glimmered like brushed steel. Ducks cut across the reflection, leaving ripples that slowly smoothed back into calm. For the first time in years, I felt no urge to fix or control anything. I simply watched. Around mid-morning, there was a soft knock at the door. When I opened it, Evelyn Shaw stood there, neat blazer, coffee in hand, the same calm that had steadied me through every storm. "It's official," she said, stepping inside. "Transfer's complete. 15 million deposited this morning." I motioned for her to sit. "That's a lot of zeros to put behind me." She smiled. "You don't look thrilled." "Happiness isn't the same as peace," I said. She studied me for a moment, maybe expecting more, but there wasn't more. The money wasn't the point. It never had been. It was the proof that I hadn't imagined the injustice, that I hadn't been the fool they thought I was. We shared coffee at the small table overlooking the lake. No more legal talk, no more strategies. Just two people who had done what needed to be done and survived it. Before she left, she placed one last envelope on the counter. "For closure," she said. "Final documentation." After she drove off, I went for a walk along the lakeshore. The ground was covered in fallen leaves, red, amber, rust. The wind carried that faint sweetness only October knows. I thought about Alara then, not with anger, just memory. Her laughter echoing in old rooms, her perfume mixing with the smell of champagne, the promises she whispered back when we both believed in forever. My mother used to tell me, "Love's not about keeping someone, it's about not losing yourself in them." It took me years, a courtroom, and 1,000 tears to understand what she meant. Maybe we all sign something before we know what it really means. For me, it wasn't the prenup. It was the silent agreement I made to stop questioning when love turned into debt. That was my mistake. Not trusting her, but forgetting me. When I got back to the cabin, I started unpacking the last box. At the bottom was the cracked photo frame, the one from our wedding. The fracture ran right through our smiles like a quiet prophecy. I didn't try to fix it this time. I placed it gently in a drawer and closed it. Some things aren't meant to be repaired. Later that afternoon, I stopped at a small diner by the highway for lunch. The place smelled of bacon and old wood polish. An older man sat a few stools down, fumbling with his wallet. When the waitress told him his card had been declined, he looked so embarrassed it hurt to watch. "Add it to my tab," I said quietly. He turned, startled. "You don't have to do that, son." "I know," I replied. "But I want to." He nodded slowly. "World could use more kindness these days." I smiled. "Or maybe just fewer people who mistake silence for weakness." He laughed. A low, genuine sound that felt like a blessing. By evening, the lake had turned to gold again. I sat on the porch, pen in hand, a blank sheet of paper before me. I started to write without thinking. "Alara, I don't hate you. You taught me what truth costs. I hope one day you find yours." I folded the letter, carried it down to the dock, and struck a match. The paper caught easily, curling and glowing until the ash scattered over the dark water. The reflection of the flames shimmered like fragments of memory, bright, then gone. As the night settled, I realized peace doesn't arrive with applause or headlines. It comes quietly, like the sound of wind through the trees or water lapping against the shore. In the end, it wasn't about taking what was hers. It was about reclaiming what was mine, my peace. Because some victories whisper, and those are the ones that last.